Let's dive into Eric Ries's The Lean Startup. It's like the entrepreneur's handbook, right? Today, we're focusing on parts 4 and 5, test and conclusion.
You know, it's funny. This book, it's not just for startups. The ideas here, they're solid for any business, especially when you're not sure what's next. Got to make some smart choices.
Yeah, I totally agree. And get this, we're going to see how Zappos, the shoe company, shows one of Ries's big ideas in action. And Instagram. They weren't always the social media giant. They pivoted, changed from something completely different. But first, part 4, testing. How Ries wants us to think about it.
I was struck by how Rees compares startups to, like, scientists in a lab. You're testing, but instead of chemicals and stuff, you're experimenting with business ideas, you know?
Okay, I like that. So instead of mixing chemicals, we're mixing marketing, product features, pricing,
Right.
all that.
Exactly. It's all about making sure your idea works before you go all in. Saves you time, money, headaches later on.
So Zappos. Nick Swinmurn, the founder, he wanted to sell shoes online, right? But he didn't go crazy renting a warehouse or building a fancy website right off the bat. Instead, he did something really scrappy.
He made a minimum viable product, an MVP. It's like a bare bones version to test if your idea works without spending a ton. Zappos, their MVP was super simple.
Okay, tell me more about this MVP. What did it look like?
Swinmurn made a basic website, just photos of shoes from local stores. When someone ordered, he'd actually run to the store, buy the shoes, ship them himself.
No way, seriously. He was like his own warehouse and delivery guy.
He was testing the big question, will people buy shoes online? No big investment. He learned pretty quick there was demand.
That's awesome. Shows you an MVP doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to test your idea. Makes me think, what am I assuming about my business? What could I test with a simple MVP?
Right. And as you're testing, got to track the right numbers, actionable metrics. That's what Rees calls them. Data that shows you how customers behave if your experiment is working.
Makes sense because not all numbers are equal. So what are some actionable metrics? How are they different from vanity metrics, the ones that look good but don't really tell you much?
Let's say you've got an online store. A vanity metric might be how many people visit your site. Sounds impressive, but it doesn't tell you if they're buying anything.
It's like a crowded store, but no one's at the register.
Exactly. An actionable metric in this case would be your conversion rate. How many visitors actually buy something? Or it could be the average order value, how much they're spending per order.
So it's about going deeper than the surface numbers and looking at what's really working.
Exactly. And all of this feeds into Ross's build, measure, learn loop, key for navigating the uncertainty of building a business.
Okay, let's break down this feedback loop. Sounds like it's at the heart of the lean startup idea.
It is. It's about constantly changing and improving based on real data. You build something, an MVP, a marketing campaign, anything, you measure it using those actionable metrics, and then you learn from the results. It's not a straight line, it's a cycle, always improving.
Like a never-ending science experiment for your business. You're testing, learning, adapting.
And speaking of adapting, let's move on to part 5, the conclusion. Rees brings it all together, lays out how to decide when to stick with your plan and when to change course.
Welcome back. Last time, we talked about the build, measure, learn loop, remember? And those actionable metrics, so important. But sometimes it's all a bit abstract, right?
Yeah, totally. The theory's good, but seeing how it works in the real world, that's what makes it click.
Right. So let's look at some companies, real companies, that use these ideas to become huge successes. Airbnb, good example. Did you know they started with a super simple MVP?
Oh, tell me about it. What was their MVP?
Okay, so picture this. 3 guys, an air mattress, and a big design conference happening in San Francisco. They had this idea, people coming to a crowded city for an event, maybe they'd want a cheaper place to stay, something different. So instead of like building a whole platform, they tested the idea with the bare minimum.
They were renting out their own apartment. That's pretty scrappy. Exactly. They took some pics of their place, made a basic website, and boom, first bookings.
Wow, that's wild. Simple idea, but it let them test their big assumption without spending a fortune.
It was. And that early feedback, it was gold. They learned people would pay for this, but they also liked the personal touch, staying in someone's home, that local feel. That shaped Airbnb into what it is today, connecting travelers with unique places all over.
It's amazing. Shows you don't need a perfect product or a huge marketing budget to start. Sometimes simple is best.
It is. And for another example, let's talk about Dropbox. Drew Houston, the founder, he kept forgetting his USB drive, losing his files. Frustrating, right?
Tell me about it. Been there.
So Drew, he wanted a smooth way to sync and store files. But instead of building this whole complex system right away, he did something clever. He made a video, a simple video, explaining how Dropbox would work.
Wait, just a video, that's all?
Well, almost. He shared it with some tech people, early adopters, and the response, it was huge. People loved it. The waitlist for Dropbox exploded overnight.
Seeing is believing, I guess. That video, smart way to prove people wanted his product without even building it yet.
Exactly. Another MVP in action. That early validation, it gave Drew the confidence and the data to get funding and build Dropbox into what it is today.
I'm seeing a pattern here.
Mhm.
Start small, test your ideas, and let the data guide you. So simple, yet so powerful.
And it's cool. This isn't just for tech companies. Let's say a local bakery, they want to sell gluten-free pastries. How could they use a lean startup approach?
I'm getting hungry already.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see what you mean. They could go all out, buy a ton of special ingredients, launch a big campaign. But what if nobody wants gluten-free in their area? Disaster.
Right. So instead of that, they could test it out, make a small batch of gluten-free muffins, give out free samples, get feedback.
Low-risk way to test their idea. Do people like the taste? Would they pay more for gluten-free?
Exactly. If the feedback is good, they can slowly make more, expand, maybe launch a whole gluten-free line. But if people aren't that into it, they can pivot, maybe try a different trend or stick to what they know works.
I love these examples. They show how flexible these principles are. Tech company, bakery, it doesn't matter. It's about testing, learning, and being ready to adjust.
Couldn't agree more. Now, while we're praising the lean startup, gotta be aware of some common pitfalls. People stumble into them all the time.
Oh, pitfalls. I'm listening. Tell me, what should I watch out for?
One mistake is getting so focused on the build part, you forget about measure and learn. You might build something amazing, but if you're not tracking how it's doing, getting feedback, you could be heading in the wrong direction.
So it's not enough to just build something and launch it. Got to analyze the data, get feedback, and make changes based on what you learn.
Right. Another trap is thinking being busy means progress. You might be running a ton of experiments, but if they're not testing your core assumptions, giving you real insights, you're just spinning your wheels.
It's like running on a treadmill. Lots of effort, but you're not going anywhere.
Perfect analogy. Be strategic with your experiments. What questions do you need answers to? What metrics will show you if you're on the right track? Design your experiments around those questions.
So it's not just about testing. It's about testing with a purpose.
Yes. And lastly, one of the biggest pitfalls, maybe the hardest to get over, is being afraid to pivot. Sometimes, even when the data shows our idea isn't working, we hold on because we've put so much into it.
It's like breaking up with a business idea you love, even though you know it's not right.
Tough, I know. But pivoting isn't failing, it's adjusting your course. You're using the data to make a smart choice. Sometimes, changing direction is the best thing you can do. Imagine if Instagram hadn't pivoted away from bourbon.
They might be a forgotten company instead of, Instagram.
Exactly. And all those companies we talked about, Airbnb, Dropbox, they all had to pivot. Being willing to adapt, that's part of why they're so successful.
So the takeaway.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to let go. If the data says pivot, do it. Embrace the change. It might lead you to something even better.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Back for the final part of our Lean Startup Deep Dive. Covered a lot, those core principles, real-world examples, the pitfalls. Before we finish, though, want to dig into some of the more advanced stuff Rees talks about.
Good idea. The Lean Startup, it's not meant to be like a rule book, more of a framework you adapt, customize, depending on the situation. So let's look at some of the more nuanced strategies, and maybe we can talk about how bigger established companies can use these ideas too, not just startups.
Perfect. Let's get into the nitty-gritty.
One technique that I find really interesting is split testing, or A/D testing. It's a way to use data to make decisions about, well, all sorts of things. Website design, marketing campaigns, you name it.
Okay, I've heard of A/B testing, but honestly, I'm not totally clear on how it works. Could you break it down for me?
Sure. Let's say you have a landing page on your site. A/B testing, you create two versions of that page. Version A is your current design, the control, and version B has a small change. Maybe the headline, an image, or the call to action. Then you randomly show these two versions to visitors and see which one performs better.
So it's like a science experiment. You isolate one thing and see what effect it has.
Exactly. And because you're testing with real people, you get real data about what works. No more guessing.
I can see how that'd be useful. Refining marketing messages, website design, even product features.
Right. The cool thing about split testing is you can use it for almost anything in your business. Different pricing models, email subject lines, product descriptions, anything.
It's like having a data feedback loop built into every decision.
That's a great way to put it. Now let's switch gears a bit. How can established businesses, companies that are already successful, how can they use this lean startup thinking? It's not just for startups, right?
No way. Even big companies need to innovate to stay ahead of the game.
Definitely. But innovating in a big company can be tough. Lots of bureaucracy, set ways of doing things, maybe a culture that's afraid of risk.
Hard to be quick and experimental when you're a huge ship trying to turn.
That's where lean startup principles can help. One idea is to create an innovation lab or a skunkworks team.
Ooh, those names sound cool. What are they exactly?
Basically, they're small teams, people from different parts of the company, and they get to work outside the normal rules. They can experiment, take risks, try new ideas without all the bureaucracy.
Like a mini startup inside the bigger company?
Precisely. These teams can work on new products, explore new markets, test out disruptive ideas, and they use that lean startup mindset. Validated learning, fast experiments, data-driven decisions.
Sounds like a good way to bring some entrepreneurial energy to a company that's feeling a bit, well, corporate.
It can be really effective. Another strategy is to encourage something called entrepreneurship across the whole company. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, but to be honest, I'm not sure what it actually means in practice.
It's about building a culture where everyone in the company feels like they can come up with ideas, test them out, and maybe turn them into something successful.
So it's not just about a special innovation team, it's about everyone feeling empowered to innovate.
Exactly. This could be things like internal idea contests, giving people resources to work on side projects, maybe even a fund to invest in promising internal ventures.
Sounds like a great way to use the creativity of your whole team.
It is. And by using these lean startup principles, even big companies can stay flexible, innovative, and ahead of the competition. They can act a bit more like startups, but still have the resources and stability of a big company.
This has been so insightful. We've gone from the basics of the lean startup to some really in-depth stuff. As we wrap up, what are the key takeaways you want our listeners to remember?
The most important thing is validated learning. Don't just guess what your customers want. Test your assumptions, build something simple, measure how it does, learn from that data, and keep improving.
And don't be afraid to pivot if the data tells you to. Sometimes changing course is the smartest thing you can do.
Definitely. It shows you're smart and adaptable, not that you failed. And remember, these ideas are flexible. Startup, big company, or even just improving something in your personal life, that experimental mindset is powerful.
It's a way to approach problems with curiosity, a willingness to experiment, and learn from mistakes.
Well said. It's about embracing uncertainty, testing your assumptions, always learning and adapting, and honestly, that's something we can all benefit from in all parts of our lives.
I couldn't agree more. Well, folks, it looks like we've reached the end of our deep dive into the lean startup. We've covered a lot of ground, from those basic principles to advanced stuff and how it works in the real world. Hope you found it as interesting and thought-provoking as I have.
It's been great diving into these ideas with you.
And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone who might find it helpful. And we always love hearing from you. What are your takeaways from the lean startup? How are you using these ideas in your work or even your personal life? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below.
And until next time, keep experimenting, keep learning, and keep building.
That's a wrap, everyone.